In my opinion, one of the best things Insomniac has done for their Spider-Man franchise is release Spider-Man Miles Morales between Marvel's Spider-Man 1 and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. It allowed us to bridge the gap and not have to wait quite as long between entries. Miles Morales was a great game in its own right that gave incredible character development to one of the primary characters of the series. It had a fun standalone plot, and considering that Marvel's Spider-Man 3 is likely still a number of years out, I think it might be a good opportunity to release another small standalone title. Today I'd like to go through a few potential spin-off options for Insomniac's Spider-Man franchise. Before I get into it, I want to hear from you. As you listen, jump down into the comments and let me know what Spider-Man spin-off you'd like to see next. The first option is a Silk game. In the first Spider-Man game, we saw Miles Morales get spider abilities, and he was only playable in a civilian capacity in that game, so Miles Morales was the opportunity for Insomniac to set him up as a playable Spider-Man in his own right. In a post-credits scene of Spider-Man 2, we were introduced to Cindy Moon. Perhaps we could get a Miles Morales treatment for Cindy Moon, where we get to play as her and learn her character development and go up against a threat that's personal to her. That way, if Insomniac intends to utilize her as a third playable character in Marvel's Spider-Man 3, we will have had an origin story to her and some character development, and that might take some of the pressure off Spider-Man 3 trying to introduce Cindy Moon and her origin story there. One of the villains they include in this Silk game could be the Chameleon or Kingpin or somebody. They could use one of the villains that was set up in Spider-Man 2, again with the intention of really focusing the story of Spider-Man 3. Another option here is that you could do Miles Morales 2, where we get a more direct sequel to his story in Spider-Man Miles Morales, and part of his character development can be becoming a leader, like Peter did. He can start to train Cindy Moon as Silk. Or, similar to how Spider-Man 2 is a story for both Peter Parker and Miles Morales, this Miles Morales and Silk game could have you playing as both protagonists, switching between them at different story points. In any case, there's no denying that Peter Parker has the most personal ties to Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn and some of the other potentially returning and new villains of Marvel's Spider-Man 3, and so making a game set between Spider-Man 2 and 3 that can involve Miles Morales and potentially Cindy Moon into the main plot more fully might be a good way to set up their involvement in the third entry. Next up, we have the one that I'm sure you guys are all spamming in the comments, a Venom game. We could get a smaller Venom game set between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. Now, how would this work exactly? I'm not sure. Would Harry be woken up from his coma and don the symbiote once again? Would the symbiote find Eddie Brock? Would this be the same Venom symbiote that was attached to Harry during Spider-Man 2, because that thing was kind of destroyed at the end of the game? But some of that symbiote still exists, as the other infected symbiotes still existed after the story concluded. At the end of the Flames side mission, Cletus Cassidy got away with the Carnage symbiote, and that could be a great place for us to face him as Venom in a standalone game. One of the best known missions of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is the one where we get to actually play as Venom when Harry dons the symbiote for a second time and becomes the gigantic monster Venom. This whole mission really did feel like Insomniac was experimenting with how combat would work, how it would differ from the gameplay of the Spider-Men, and the results were pretty awesome. They found a good balance between maintaining the difficulty of the game, but also making it feel like a power fantasy. You feel so powerful if you're playing the character right. Now, would this be like Ultimate Spider-Man, where we get to play as a villain as Venom, or would this be more of a lethal protector direction? I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I personally think Insomniac would lean toward making a lethal protector style Venom game, maybe a Maximum Carnage game where he teams up with Miles Morales and goes to take on Cletus Cassidy as Carnage. And like Silk, I think this is another opportunity where they maybe wouldn't make Venom the only playable character. It's possible that Miles Morales or Cindy Moon or both would work in conjunction with Venom here. Maybe they would go down a similar route that Ultimate did, where you're playing as Venom for some of it and you're playing as Miles Morales or Cindy Moon for some of it, and then you get to have a boss fight against Venom or Spider-Man at the end. Alternatively, like I kind of mentioned, maybe there's a larger threat like Carnage that the Spider-Men and Venom would team up to go take on. There's also a lot of directions you could take in terms of who the protagonist of this game would be. It could be Harry Osborn. He could wake up from his coma and rebond with the symbiote. Maybe we introduce Eddie Brock. Maybe Flash Thompson is Venom in this story. In any case, it would be really fun and cool, but one thing I think is worth addressing is the tragic fact that Tony Todd has recently passed away. He did so good as Venom in Spider-Man 2 and many other roles over the course of his career. I know he's mentioned in interviews that they only used about 10% of his Venom dialogue, and so perhaps some of that could be repurposed into a playable Venom game, but if it's not able to be done, there would have to be a conversation over whether or not you retire the character in the Insomniac universe or if you recast. It's never an easy answer in these situations, and I think that both options can be done tastefully. It just depends on how Insomniac's story is going to play out. Another option Insomniac could go with for a spin-off game is a Peter Parker-centric prequel. We could play through his origin story and have a smaller-scale Miles Morales-sized game where he develops as Spider-Man. We could see his first encounters with certain villains like Electro, Scorpion, Kingpin, and Vulture. A lot of these characters who were killed off in Spider-Man 2 unceremoniously and will not be returning in Spider-Man 3 most likely, unless you have the Jackal clone them or something. That was honestly one of the biggest missed opportunities that many of us felt Spider-Man 2 perpetrated, was killing off all of these really interesting renditions of these characters. So going back and seeing Peter Parker in his early days would allow some of these characters to get more screen time. We could also get development for characters that we haven't met yet in the Insomniac universe. We could spend more time at Midtown High and meet Flash Thompson, Liz Allen, Gwen Stacy, and more. If Spider-Man 3 wanted to use a character like Liz Allen or Gwen Stacy but hasn't introduced them yet, this could be a great way to set a precedent for them existing in the universe and setting up a story arc for them that could play out in Spider-Man 3. And while there's no way to know if Peter will retire or even die at the end of Spider-Man 3, it is very possible that it will see his career as Spider-Man come to an end, and getting a prequel that shows us the beginning could be a nice bookend to that. Another possible prequel opportunity would be to do a Prowler game where you play as Aaron Davis as the Prowler, and the main villain of the piece could be Jefferson Davis, Miles Morales' father. The backstory of these two characters has been one of the more interesting ones of the Insomniac Spider-Man series, so getting to see that story play out in a small standalone game could be really fun and interesting. It could put a real spin on the perception of established characters. As the Prowler, maybe we're trying to avoid the attention of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Maybe our associations with some of these villains isn't as antagonistic as Spider-Man's relationships to some of these characters are. For example, maybe we have a working relationship with Scorpion for a while. We could see a much younger Miles Morales who hasn't been bitten by the spider yet and see the influence that his uncle had on his life. Getting to play through the story where Jefferson Davis and Aaron Davis turned on each other and felt betrayed by each other would be a really unique story to tell in this kind of medium. Now, the final two characters that I want to talk about as potential candidates for a spin-off game in Insomniac's Spider-Man universe are Black Cat and Silver Sable. With either of these characters, we could change locations, so we wouldn't be in New York for this spin-off game. If we were Black Cat, we could be in Paris. If we were Silver Sable, we could be in Symkaria. Black Cat is a very interesting character in Insomniac's Spider-Man series, and broadly speaking, she's a fan favorite Spider-Man character. So getting a game focused on her, where maybe we're seeing more of her reformation in Paris, where she's trying to be more of a hero or anti-hero now, could be an interesting direction to go. With Silver Sable, though perhaps not quite as popular, she's had a lot of setup in this series. The war in Symkaria that she's involved in has been mentioned in every single game, and so to get a game where we get to see that war firsthand and play as her and figure out who the main villain of this war is and take them down could be cool too. Like the Prowler, you'd get to experiment with completely different gameplay. Their traversal would be different, their combat style would be different, and we just get a different spin on the gameplay. Insomniac has also done a great job with the open world New York City, but getting to see that same attention to detail and care rendered in a new environment like Symkaria or Paris would be equally exciting. I think with both of those characters, you also have the opportunity to dip a little deeper into Spider-Man's lore and use villains that perhaps wouldn't be used in Spider-Man 3 for being a little bit too obscure. You could reimagine them as Black Cat or Silver Sable villains. In any case, if Insomniac does indeed choose to do another spin-off game set between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, I think it will be a very wise choice. It will allow them to clean up some of the plot threads and loose ends so that Spider-Man 3 can really just focus on the few key things that they want to focus on. They can continue to expand the franchise and make it feel more open and lived in and give us a new perspective on this world that we haven't seen yet. Thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we will see you guys in the next one.